Have you ever wondered why certain emotions, fears, or impulses seem to come out of nowhere, sometimes even surprising or unsettling you? Carl Jung called this hidden part of the psyche the shadow self, the side of us we try to deny, repress, or keep in the dark. But here's the truth: ignoring the shadow doesn't make it disappear, it makes it stronger, showing up in ways we don't always understand. In this video, we'll explore Jung's concept of the shadow self and why confronting it is essential for healing, growth, and true self-awareness. You'll learn how your shadow influences your relationships, your choices, and even the way you see yourself. And most importantly, I'll guide you through a clear step-by-step method to face your inner darkness, not with fear, but with courage, so you can transform it into one of your greatest sources of power. Carl Jung, one of the most influential thinkers in modern psychology, introduced the concept of the shadow self as a core element of the human psyche. The shadow represents all the parts of ourselves that we deny, suppress, or hide away, qualities we believe are unacceptable, embarrassing, or shameful. These are aspects of our personality we don't want to admit, either to others or even to ourselves. At first glance, most people assume the shadow is only about negative traits like anger, jealousy, greed, or selfishness. But Jung made it clear that the shadow can also contain positive qualities we've repressed, hidden talents, deep desires, or natural strengths that we buried because we were told they were wrong, impractical, or unwanted. For instance, a child scolded for being too bold might repress their confidence, and later struggle with self-expression as an adult. To visualize the shadow, think of it as a locked closet in your mind. Over the years, everything we don't want to face gets shoved inside: our anger, fears, desires, but also our forgotten gifts. The problem is, the closet doesn't stay closed forever. Eventually, what's inside spills out, often in ways we can't control: sudden bursts of anger, destructive habits, toxic relationships, or harsh judgments toward others. This is why Jung warned us that ignoring the shadow only gives it more power. When left unacknowledged, the shadow controls us unconsciously. We project it onto others, blaming them for the qualities we secretly struggle with in ourselves. We see our hidden flaws reflected back in the people we dislike, or we're triggered by behaviors that mirror what we've buried. But Jung didn't see the shadow as something purely negative or evil. Instead, he believed it was a vital part of becoming whole. The shadow is not our enemy, it is a teacher, a guide to self-awareness, and a source of immense power. When we begin to face it with honesty and compassion, we stop being ruled by unconscious impulses. Instead, we integrate these hidden aspects into our conscious self, reclaiming energy, creativity, and authenticity. The shadow isn't bad. It is simply unacknowledged. By bringing it into the light of awareness, we open the door to transformation. Facing the shadow is the first step toward wholeness, because only by embracing all parts of ourselves, both light and dark, can we truly know who we are. From the earliest moments of our lives, we're shaped by the world around us, our families, schools, religions, and cultural norms. We're taught what behaviors are rewarded and what traits are frowned upon. Smiling, being polite, sharing, and showing discipline are often praised. But when we express emotions like anger, sadness, or boldness, we may be told to stop it, be quiet, or act properly. Slowly, we learn which parts of ourselves are acceptable and which are not. This constant shaping creates an internal split. Instead of embracing the full spectrum of who we are, we suppress the traits that others reject. But those rejected traits don't vanish. They sink deep into the unconscious, forming what Carl Jung called the shadow. Take, for example, a child who is told they are too loud. Instead of celebrating their natural confidence and presence, they might learn to silence themselves and fade into the background. Similarly, a child shamed for crying may bury their sensitivity and instead create a hardened, tough exterior. Over time, qualities that are natural expressions of humanity, vulnerability, boldness, desire, even creativity, become locked away. At the core, the reason we hide our shadow is fear of rejection, judgment, humiliation, or abandonment. As children, acceptance from caregivers and peers feels like survival, so we do whatever it takes to fit in. We sacrifice authenticity for approval. The irony, however, is that suppressing these parts of ourselves doesn't erase them. In fact, the more we bury the shadow, the more it quietly influences our lives. It seeps into our thoughts, our choices, and especially our relationships. We may lash out unexpectedly, feel trapped in repeating patterns, or become overly critical of others, all because of unacknowledged parts of ourselves. On the surface, hiding our shadow helps us feel acceptable. But underneath, it disconnects us from our wholeness. We become fragmented, living only from the side of ourselves we think is safe to show. True growth begins when we realize this: the shadow is not the enemy. By facing the parts we've rejected, we reclaim them and begin to live with greater authenticity. To integrate the shadow is to step into our full humanity, stronger, freer, and more real. Carl Jung warned that what we refuse to face within ourselves does not disappear. It only grows stronger in the dark. When we ignore the shadow, it doesn't simply vanish. It leaks into our lives in unconscious, destructive ways. One of the most powerful expressions of the shadow is projection. This occurs when we unconsciously attribute our own hidden traits to others. For instance, a person who represses selfish tendencies might constantly accuse others of being selfish. Someone who denies their anger may find themselves surrounded by angry people or suddenly explode over trivial matters. Projection blinds us to our own flaws while making it easy to criticize those around us. It distorts reality, keeping us stuck in patterns of judgment and misunderstanding. Another danger lies in emotional triggers. If you find yourself reacting with extreme irritation, jealousy, or judgment towards certain behaviors, chances are those same qualities exist in you, buried, but not gone. These blind spots act like pressure points, keeping us caught in cycles of conflict, pain, or resentment. Every time we suppress our emotions, we give the shadow more control over how we act and react. On a deeper level, ignoring the shadow stunts personal growth. To reject our flaws is to reject the opportunity to learn, heal, and transform them into strengths. Acknowledging fear can give rise to courage. Facing selfishness can teach us balance. Even anger, when embraced consciously, can be redirected into assertiveness and healthy boundaries. But when these qualities remain hidden, they fester into destructive patterns, unhealthy relationships, addictions, or self-sabotage. The shadow also impacts relationships. Left unacknowledged, it sabotages intimacy, causing conflicts, projections, and repeated toxic dynamics. Instead of seeing others clearly, we see our unhealed parts mirrored back at us. Jung summarized this truth in one of his most famous quotes. "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." When we refuse to face the shadow, we feel controlled by life circumstances, not realizing that much of our suffering comes from within. Ultimately, confronting the shadow is not about achieving perfection, it is about achieving freedom. By shining light on the darkness, we reclaim our power, live with greater authenticity, and finally take responsibility for our own lives. Our closest relationships are some of the most powerful mirrors we have in life. Carl Jung observed that much of the shadow reveals itself in how we react to others, especially those we love or spend the most time with. The people closest to us inevitably trigger strong emotions: anger, jealousy, irritation, admiration, or even obsession. These reactions are rarely random. More often than not, they point to hidden, unacknowledged parts of ourselves. Take jealousy, for example. If you feel extreme jealousy in a relationship, it may not be about your partner's actions at all. It could be reflecting your own buried fear of inadequacy or rejection. Likewise, if you find arrogance unbearable in someone else, it may be that you've repressed your own confidence, and their boldness stirs something uncomfortable within you. This is the shadow at work. What we dislike, or even admire, in others often reflects traits within ourselves that remain hidden. This is why relationships are such fertile ground for shadow work. They push us to confront the parts of ourselves we would rather avoid. Instead of blaming our partners with statements like, "You make me so angry," we can shift the focus inward and ask, What part of me is being touched here? This perspective doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it gives us the power to understand why certain actions affect us so deeply. The shadow also influences attraction. Sometimes we're drawn to qualities in others that mirror what we've buried. For instance, someone who has suppressed their adventurous spirit may be irresistibly drawn to a partner who embodies freedom and boldness. At first, this feels exciting, but over time, it can also create tension if the buried part of ourselves remains unintegrated. By becoming aware of the shadow's role in relationships, we stop unconsciously projecting and start taking responsibility for our own inner world. This doesn't mean relationships become free of conflict, but it means conflicts can transform into opportunities for self-discovery and growth. Facing the shadow within relationships leads to deeper intimacy. Instead of expecting our partners to carry the weight of our hidden wounds, we meet them as whole individuals. And in doing so, we create space for love, trust, and growth to flourish. The very first step in shadow work is awareness. You cannot change, heal, or transform what you cannot see. Jung emphasized that much of our psyche operates unconsciously, shaping our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors without us realizing it. By bringing awareness to these hidden influences, we begin reclaiming power from the shadow. Awareness starts with noticing your patterns, reactions, and triggers. Pay attention to the moments when you feel unusually emotional or reactive. Do you get disproportionately angry at small mistakes? Do you feel an intense jealousy in situations that don't fully warrant it? Do you find yourself feeling defensive or judgmental when certain people are around? These strong reactions are often signals that your shadow has been touched. A powerful practice is to keep a journal of these experiences. Whenever you feel triggered, write down what happened, what you felt, and why it bothered you so much. Then gently ask, "What part of me is this really about?" Over time, you'll notice patterns that reveal the aspects of yourself you've been unconsciously rejecting. Dreams are another profound gateway into shadow awareness. Jung believed that the unconscious communicates through dreams, often using symbolic imagery. Recurring characters, frightening figures, or even strangers in your dreams may represent hidden parts of yourself. Writing down your dreams and reflecting on their themes can provide powerful clues about what your shadow is trying to express. It's important to remember that awareness is not about judgment. The goal is not to label yourself as good or bad, but to simply observe without shame. Every human being has a shadow. Having dark, repressed, or uncomfortable aspects does not make you broken, it makes you human. By cultivating awareness, you begin to shine a light on what was once hidden. This simple act of noticing begins to loosen the shadow's grip on your life. Instead of being unconsciously controlled by your repressed traits, you start to see them clearly, which gives you the power to respond rather than react. Awareness is the doorway to integration. Once you can recognize the shadow at work, you create space for understanding, acceptance, and transformation. Without awareness, the shadow controls you. With awareness, you take the first step toward freedom. Once you've taken the first step of awareness, the next stage of shadow work is reflection. Awareness shines a light on your triggers and patterns, but reflection helps you explore what they mean and how they connect to the deeper layers of your psyche. This is where self-honesty becomes essential. Reflection begins with asking honest questions about the moments that stir strong emotions within you. When you feel irritated, jealous, or defensive, pause and ask, "What part of me is this reaction pointing to?" Instead of focusing on the external situation, turn the lens inward. The goal here is not to blame yourself or others, but to cultivate curiosity about why certain experiences carry so much emotional weight. Journaling is one of the most effective tools for reflection. Write about the events that triggered you, the emotions that arose, and what they might reveal about you. For example, if you felt anger because someone ignored you, ask yourself whether this touches a deeper fear of being unseen or unimportant. Writing freely without censoring yourself often brings unconscious material to the surface, allowing you to see patterns more clearly. Another powerful practice Jung recommended is active imagination. This involves letting the unconscious speak through symbols, dialogue, or visualization. Suppose you keep dreaming of a shadowy figure. Instead of dismissing it, imagine sitting across from this figure and starting a conversation. Ask it, "Who are you? What do you want me to know?" While it may feel unusual, this practice bridges the conscious and unconscious, revealing insights that journaling alone may not access. Reflection also extends into your relationships. Pay attention to the qualities in others that evoke strong reactions in you. The traits you criticize harshly may reflect parts of yourself you've rejected, while the traits you admire deeply may point to hidden gifts you've suppressed. For instance, if you envy someone's boldness, it might mean you've buried your own courage. Through reflection, the shadow begins to shift from something threatening into something informative. You realize it isn't your enemy, it's a teacher. Every uncomfortable emotion, every strong reaction, is an invitation to learn more about yourself. By engaging in this reflective process, you uncover the deeper truths that awareness alone cannot reveal. Reflection gives meaning to awareness and prepares you for the next step, acceptance. After awareness and reflection, the most important phase of shadow work is integration. This is where the real transformation happens. Integration doesn't mean erasing or defeating your shadow. It means embracing it as an essential part of who you are. Jung believed that wholeness is not found in perfection, but in reconciling the opposites within us, the light and the dark, the conscious and the unconscious. Integration begins with self-compassion. When you uncover traits you've long rejected, such as anger, pride, selfishness, or vulnerability, it's natural to feel resistance or even shame. But instead of suppressing them again, pause and remind yourself. These are natural human qualities. Every trait, even the ones we fear or dislike, has a healthy expression. The key is not to deny them, but to channel them constructively. For example, suppressed anger can transform into healthy assertiveness and clear boundaries. Repressed confidence can emerge as leadership and courage. Even vulnerability, when embraced, allows for deeper intimacy, trust, and authentic connection. Integration is about reclaiming these buried aspects and expressing them consciously, rather than letting them erupt unconsciously. Another crucial part of integration is taking responsibility. When you recognize a projection, like blaming someone else for being arrogant, selfish, or cold, you can pause and ask, "What is this showing me about myself?" Instead of living as a victim of circumstances, you begin to see life as a mirror. The world reflects your inner reality, offering constant opportunities for growth. This shift from blame to responsibility is deeply empowering, because it puts you back in control of your emotional life. Integration also requires practice and patience. The shadow will not dissolve overnight. It takes consistent awareness, reflection, and conscious action to weave these hidden parts into your daily life. Sometimes this means expressing emotions you've long suppressed, having honest conversations, or making choices that honor your true feelings rather than just your acceptable ones. Over time, integration leads to a profound sense of wholeness. You no longer live in fragments, pretending to be only your light side while hiding your darker impulses. Instead, you embrace your full humanity, recognizing that both light and shadow are essential to who you are. This balance is what Jung called individuation, the lifelong process of becoming your truest, most authentic self. By integrating the shadow, you don't just heal, you unlock hidden energy, creativity, and wisdom. You stop running from yourself and begin living as a whole, empowered human being. When you choose to face your shadow, you step into one of the most powerful journeys of self-discovery and transformation. The shadow is not an enemy to fight, but a part of you to embrace. By bringing it into awareness and integrating it, you unlock profound benefits for your emotional, relational, and even spiritual life. The first gift of shadow work is emotional resilience. Instead of being hijacked by unconscious impulses, like sudden anger, jealousy, or defensiveness, you begin to understand where these reactions come from. You see your triggers as signals, not enemies. This awareness gives you choice. You can pause, reflect, and respond rather than react blindly. In doing so, you reclaim control over your inner world. In relationships, the benefits are life-changing. Most conflict arises from projection, blaming others for what we cannot accept in ourselves. Shadow work helps you recognize these projections and take responsibility for them. Rather than saying, "You make me angry," you can ask, "What is this anger showing me about myself?" This shift reduces conflict, fosters compassion, and strengthens bonds. You stop seeing others as threats and begin to see them as mirrors reflecting your growth. Another powerful outcome of shadow work is the release of creativity and energy. Many of your hidden talents, passions, and desires lie buried in the shadow because they were rejected or shamed early in life. When you reclaim them, you tap into an inner reservoir of vitality. Artists, writers, leaders, and innovators throughout history have often drawn inspiration from their shadow, the parts of themselves that broke free when brought into the light. Most importantly, shadow work leads to authenticity. You no longer need to wear masks to please others or hide the parts of yourself you deem unacceptable. Instead, you embrace your full humanity, the light and the dark, the strengths and the flaws. This authenticity allows you to live with greater balance, freedom, and peace. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Shadow work is the process of doing exactly that. By confronting what you fear, deny, or reject, you transform darkness into wisdom. You discover that the very qualities you once ran from hold the keys to your growth, creativity, and wholeness. Ultimately, the power of shadow work is this: it turns your inner darkness into a source of light. What once controlled you in silence becomes the very fuel for your transformation. Shadow work, as Carl Jung envisioned, is not about defeating darkness, it is about embracing it. Throughout this journey, we've explored what the shadow self is, why we hide it, the dangers of ignoring it, and how it influences our relationships. We've also seen how awareness, reflection, and integration allow us to reclaim the parts of ourselves we've buried. The final piece is understanding why this work matters so deeply. The truth is, the shadow will never disappear. It is not a flaw in your personality, but a natural part of being human. Every suppressed emotion, every denied desire, and every hidden strength has its place. When we try to banish the shadow, it only grows stronger in the dark, leaking into our lives through projection, unhealthy patterns, or conflict. But when we face it, we reclaim control. We stop living unconsciously, and we begin to live with clarity and choice. Think of the shadow as a doorway. On the other side lies authenticity, freedom, and power. By acknowledging your shadow, you unlock resilience. You no longer crumble under your triggers because you understand their roots. You unlock compassion. You see others not as enemies, but as mirrors reflecting your own growth. And perhaps most beautifully, you unlock creativity and energy. Hidden talents and passions that were long suppressed finally emerge, giving you a new sense of vitality. In relationships, shadow work transforms the way we connect. Instead of blaming others for our pain, we recognize the lessons hidden in our reactions. We stop searching for perfect partners to complete us and instead bring wholeness into our relationships. This shift creates bonds rooted in authenticity, acceptance, and growth, rather than fear and projection. But shadow work is not a one-time exercise. It is a lifelong process, a dialogue with yourself that deepens over time. Awareness brings light. Reflection gives meaning. Integration brings transformation. And the ongoing practice of living with the shadow ensures that you grow more whole with each step. Jung called this lifelong process individuation, the path of becoming your true self. Not the self you think you should be, not the mask you wear for society, but the whole, authentic you. Light and dark. Strength and vulnerability. Success and failure. All of it belongs. And here is the ultimate takeaway. The parts of yourself you fear the most may actually hold the keys to your greatest growth. The anger you've suppressed may carry the strength to set boundaries. The envy you've denied may point you toward your deepest desires. The vulnerability you've hidden may open the door to real love. As Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Shadow work is the act of making the darkness conscious. It is the courage to face yourself fully, and in doing so, to finally live authentically. So, if you take one thing away from this journey, let it be this: your shadow is not your enemy, it is your teacher. And by embracing it, you don't just heal, you transform. You don't just survive, you thrive. And you don't just live a fragment of life, you live as a whole, radiant human being.